So, and getting yourself in Seattle traffic. TVW is here, as you can see, and for the sake of people who are watching this on TVW, let me say the PI editorial board today is interviewing Harold Hochstatter, state senator from the 13th district and a Republican candidate for governor. We interviewed Senator Hochstatter's opponent, John Carlson, earlier in the season. Senator, we're going to ask you to make 2 minutes worth of opening remarks, anything you want to talk about.
Great.
And then we'll have a series of questions for you. And then at the end, you'll get a generous 1 minute, 60 seconds to wrap up or cover anything that we didn't get to talk about. So if you want to begin, I have an egg timer which will tell you when 2 minutes is up.
Hey, that's the way we run it in the committees.
Okay, then.
Harold Hochstatter, born in Nepal, which became Moses Lake in '37, educated in the schools there. I went to Wazoo, where I met my wife. Had a 2-year break because at the request of the Academic Standings Committee, and went in the Army in Augusta, Georgia. Signal Corps, come back out and went to work and married, went to work in Hochstatter Electric, became one of the owners in '68, and managed until '90 when I got into the political business. And wife and 5 kids, 7 grandchildren, serve on Ways and Means, education for 8 years, energy utilities and communications for the 10 years that I've been in, and now rules and workforce training labor. Is that my 2 minutes?
Oh, you've got
Well,
almost a minute left.
hey, let me get into 3 issues. What got me into this business is I'm concerned that our state is being run by people that we did not elect and cannot unelect. That's my most important issue. Secondly, I'm an ardent opposition to the current restructuring in education. I've been on that committee since we did the 1209 bill in '93. I've got such a stack of bibliography. I'm told it's too complicated. You cannot convey your objection in this format. So buy me some coffee sometime. One of the things that really got me going on this whole issue was gifted parents would come in and say, get our children out of this. This will dumb our children down. And that started me on the most exhaustive quest of what's going on in education, primarily from the federal level. Your rival competitor, Sunday, 10 days ago, had a marvelous article on the WASL. Did you?
We'll ask you to get into that some more
Okay.
as we go on. Did you want to mention the third?
Salmon and privacy.
Salmon and privacy.
Leave the dams in, take the nets out. Forgive me, I was just itching for the lights to go out over here. I use a quote from Svetlana Stalin. She says, we dwelt at the pinnacle of power where reality hardly ever reached at all.
Right.
And I fear that there is reality connected to taking those dams out.
Good. Thank you. Let's begin our questions with Thomas Shapley.
Thanks, Senator. When your opponent, John Carlson, was in here, we asked him how he qualified for office, being basically a radio talk show host. Certainly, we don't have to ask that question of you. You're a third-term senator. So I'll move on to the other part of the question, and that is, you do clearly, though, in the legislature have an identity as conservative and very much east of the mountains perspective.
Okay.
So the question is, sort of 2 parts. How do you intend then to represent the entire state or serve the entire state as governor? And how would you get along with the legislature?
Let me defend John. I was in Shale Park High School in Spokane. There's a plaque in there that contains Jefferson's first inaugural, 1801. He says, we often hear that men are unfit to govern themselves. Are they then fit to govern others? Hey, here's an ordinary electrical contractor. setting up shop in the state senate. Hey, that's heady stuff. I happen to believe that this country, if we don't communicate the heritage that anybody can grow up to be president. Now we're getting into education, by the way, that we've denied our children their own heritage. How do I cross the mountains? Notice my issues. They're not even east-west. Well, maybe the salmon thing is a little bit, but the government being controlled by bureaucrats, that's not RD. I want that power to be in the hands of people in both parties. Education, certainly, this is and this education is creating a whole different consensus. The teachers are under tremendous pressure through this wassail. They're at odds with their union. I'm delighted. But notice these issues are not necessarily R&D. The salmon issue, yeah, I think is probably east-west. My point is to take the nets out. The gill nets have got to go. The gill nets kill birds, mammals, everything they catch. They also size the fish to be smaller. You aware of that? The salmon and the Skagit have gone from 7.7 pounds to 5.5 pounds in 15 years. We catch the big spawners and kill them and let the little spawners go up. We're sizing the gene pool for failure. The smaller fish carry fewer eggs and spawn in the shallower water. There are other methodologies that we have to use. We have to go to purse seining, where we can get rid of the incidental catch. So in those issues, I'm not east-west. Now, talking about my colleagues, I'm embarrassed to say, oh, and I'm being taped, aren't I? I'm on a letter with Vilma Valoria in opposition to WTO. And I'm saying, hey, my beloved Pinkos, what am I doing on this letter with you? Who are these people? Who is WTO? How did you elect them? I didn't. And so I'm concerned. I don't want to break Starbucks' window, but I want to know who these folks are and what kind of power do they have. I fear that big business, whatever, is going to, and understand this, I'm at odds also with the Business Roundtable on education, but I fear that there's an effort to export jobs, and I see that the most favored nation status is moving forward in the Senate. I wrote to Slade Gorton and said, don't you do this. And so Denny Hick from TVW says, you're kind of populist. And again, I object to labels. I say I've got more labels on me than a misplaced suitcase. And when they had that feeding frenzy, when I first announced, and all the reporters came up, I says, if you don't cut this labeling out, you're destroying the level of political discourse in this country by putting labels on folks. So, did you get an answer? Okay.
I'd like to talk with you a little bit more about your criticism of the education reforms that were embedded in 1209. Can you clarify specifically what it is that is going wrong here in your opinion, and talk about what your solution to it is, and what it would be? I mean, let me say that presumably you would be running against the self-described education governor. So when voters look at you and your opponents, perhaps,
sure.
What would they see?
The self-described, thank you, education governor's been 12 years in the legislature, never served in the committee. Somebody needs to expose that. I've been 8 years on that committee. The education restructuring, and again, big subject. If you follow the how we got this thing through GSERF and then the gap analysis, do you know much about the history? The gap analysis, we had David Hornbeck come in here and do what they call a gap analysis, fill in the restructuring between the GSERF report of 91, I think, and the Business Roundtable's bill.
That was in the early 90s.
Early 90s. And out of that, we got the restructuring bill that has all of these things. Understand, that reform is nationwide. It was essentially bought off the shelf and introduced into all the states. And
what do you think was the impetus for that reform?
First of all, we once knew how to educate people in this country. There should be no doubt in anybody's mind that this country had a preeminent education 50 years ago. I read an article called "Hang Down Your Head, John Dewey." And if you read some of Dewey's statements about we don't have to educate everybody, everybody doesn't have to learn to read, it makes my skin crawl to think of people saying that kind of thing. Sounding kind of democratic, aren't I? You see, I'm saying we need to raise the level of everybody. Let me get real redneck and say Martin Luther said, "You bet we have to teach everybody how to read." The outcome-based model, that is, says teach them, test them, remediate them, and that's fairly good if you're talking academics. If you read Bill Spady, and he's no relation to Jim, the people that are pushing the charter. Bill Spady is one of the creators of outcome-based education, and he says that there is traditional, transitional, transformational outcome-based education, and you move people through that. You bait them on with traditional academics, things that you and I want, and things that we can agree on. We want our kids to learn to read, write, to spell, know history, geography, sciences. We want that. But if you get in the child's character, that's reserved for families, churches, whatever.
Are you saying that education reform, as passed by the legislature, addresses a child's character?
Yes.
How so?
According to Spady, and I'll get you some documentation. Forgive me.
Okay, go ahead.
Forgive me for not. But according to Spady, the new basics, and this is in a document called, and I need to be correct, the Goals 2000 Toolkit that says. Let me quote this. I think I'm very accurate. They, meaning you and me, the American people, have to get over the idea that there's any going back to basics in education. And they're talking about new basics, which are...
Who is talking?
This is the Goals 2000 Toolkit for implementing Goals 2000 within the states. And I can get you that paper. If I'm a killer with pamphlets, I say, prove me wrong. God willing, I am wrong. I'd like that. Spady says values, beliefs, and behaviors. We have to change the child's values, beliefs, and behaviors. That's.
And so you're saying that this is what is going on under
that we are working toward a effective, not a cognitive, but an effective education. Now then, if you get a child in a teach them, test them, remediate them, and teach them values, beliefs, and behaviors, he's hung. The pressure is intense upon him to change his values, beliefs, and behaviors in this teach them, test them, remediate them structure. I've got a test, and I can't draw the line. You see how confusing this can be? I can't fit it into the program to say, yes, this is intensely Goals 2000. But in there's a question. It's like 13 questions or so. One of the questions is, business is basically greedy, out for profit, only way they can get it.
What's the source of this question?
This came out of the Kittitas or Ellensburg School District. But let me give you the question. And this is very important. This whole education direction is more important than anything that I'm involved in. The question says, business is basically greedy, out for profit, only way they can get it, and they need big government to keep them straight. Now, I'll send you this. The important thing about this is they scored it. There's a right answer. When I was in the Education Committee, Dwight Pells, who is on your board here, was the chairman. A fair man, liberal as can be, but a fair man. And his child would answer that question different than my child. But what happens is in an outcome-based system, our children will be remediated to achieve whatever that viewpoint of that scorer.
And you're saying this is what's going to take place in the Wassel tests?
Well, the Wassel also is very, very subjective.
So you're not talking about Wassel now and what you've just told us?
No, I'm not talking about the Wassel. I'm talking about the direction of outcome-based education. Take the framework of outcome-based education, teach them, test them, remediate them, feed into that values, beliefs, and behaviors, and believe me, it's in there. Feed that in, and if you look at our goals, the ELERs, they're intensely subjective.
Let me ask you something on that point. Do you agree that students in the state of Washington should be tested for basic academic competence before they are allowed to graduate with either a certificate of mastery or diploma, whatever you mentioned?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so
we're talking, understand there's a difference between skills and a broad academic subject. If you can say, I can do it, I can write, that's a skill. I can drive a car, that's a skill. But if you say I can do geology, you're lying. That's a broad-based academic subject that we all can't have total competence in. They say that education in Washington is a mile wide and an inch deep. I like that. I want your child to be exposed to all of that so that the time will come when he will say, I can play the flute. Wow. Or boy, this calculus is a lot of fun.
What would you do about what you've just explained to us as governor?
First of all, I would send that Goals 2000 money packing along with the red tape and do everything I could to get your local school board in control of your school. Now then, the union is a major part of the enemy. The union is, and understand most of my comments will fit in the concept of I'm very, very opposed to monopoly in business, in government, and in labor.
So
and in media.
For clarification, would you then end the WASL testing track in
the
this
WASL
state?
is very subjective. Are you familiar with E.D. Hirsch? Do you know who he is? He wrote a book called The Schools We Need and Why We Don't Have Them. He also has a curriculum for homeschooling. In there, he has a chapter called Test Evasion, and he says, we all thought that if we would have submitted one of our essays to another section of the same class, it would get a different grade. Well, they took 50 essays and submitted them to 150 different graders. A mathematical third of those essays got the full range from D- to A. What does it say? Subjective. It's essay. I told Terry Bergeson, I says, in the 19th century, there was 265 words that were delivered in oration that people who really should know about putting words together, newspapers, hollered and shouted about it as how awful it was, the Gettysburg Address.
Thank you.
Take that. See? And the newspaper, you know what happened to Lincoln, and what happened is one of the greatest things said in the 19th century. My point is this, that the old, when the bill passed, I was able to get concurrent testing, both to stay with the CTBS and the WASL, so we didn't step from one, change the methodology and the testing together. I was able to get that in. I was able to change that the parents, it says the parents are equal partners. Pardon me, the parents are supreme in the education of their children.
Okay, we need to get on to another subject. Kimberly Mills.
I'd like to ask you about DSHS. I understand from listening to the number of committees that you have served on that you probably haven't served on a committee that directly affects that agency.
I served on Human Services in the House, and believe me, I got off of that thing.
Okay. Well, I'd like you to get back on for a second because I want to ask you, Dennis Braddock is very early in his term as DSHS Secretary, appointed by Governor Locke recently. Would you replace him if you became governor? And I'd also like to ask, DSHS is often referred to as embattled. Do you have any concrete ideas of ways to make it better, more responsive to the public?
First of all, I'm a government man, but have you seen the bumper sticker, I love my country and fear my government? Not all questions have a government answer. Mm-hmm. DSHS has an impossible job. They're trying to deal with things that have gone wrong in families. They say that the best place to raise a kid is a good family, the next place to raise a kid is a rotten family, and the worst place to raise a kid is in the system. The system is charged with an awful job, and they're doing an awful job. These lawsuits and things like this is incompetent. I served in the House with Dennis, and I think Dennis is competent. I've made some ill-tempered remarks about heads of states or heads of agencies roll. They're round and they roll, and I would roll them all. Dennis is brand new. The functions need to be scaled back. And again, take the Linda David thing, for example. That's inexcusable. That couldn't happen in Hochstatter Electric. It's a case of oversight. When I first announced Jim Hargrove, who knows these issues, sits right across the aisle from me, and he come up and says, "Hey, I want to have that head of that agency." And I says, "You got it, Jim, but you're going to be the only employee." And so I'm saying that yes, we need to not only scale it back, but get it local. When I was a kid and you went on welfare, you went on the county. You went on the county took care of that. Ideally, some other entity. I had a really unpopular bill that said, ask them to bunk up to welfare women. If you get $440 a month, two of you, that's $880. You get two 20-hour jobs. You sit each other's kids. You keep the stork away. Just like my daughter had 5 nurses living together up in Spokane. Very unpopular idea. But I thought, hey, that's kind of what I did in the Army, or in college. So I don't think anybody can defend it. Something has got to be done, but at the same time, the government didn't make this mess. This is a failing in our society at large, and just as I won't make every appeal I can to the police power, but I'm to keep your integrity. I get into talking about let me give you a little bit of philosophy here. 4 institutions: family, business, government, the church. Let's take an issue. Teenage pregnancy. Has the business got an answer? Sure, buy our condoms. Has the government got an answer? Yeah, we'll buy you the condoms. Has the family got an answer? Give your word and keep it for change? I like that answer. That's one I hope for myself and my children and your children. And lastly, has the church got an answer? Yeah, I don't even think of such a thing. So it's a problem of putting the mail in the right slot, but if we always say there's got to be a government answer, we get into this mess, and we're coming to the point where the taxpayers are tapped out. The taxpayers are tapped out. We can't buy or bluff our way out of some of these problems. So, how's that?
Would you replace Mr. Braddock?
No, I would give Dennis a shot at it because he's new. Yeah, and so I'd like to sit down with him. Maybe I would. I'd like to sit down with him, but I would demand that something happen. It can't grind along the way it's going.
Thank you. You talked about all of this is not government's job, yet you are running...
Some things are.
Okay. I want you to tell us what jobs are the government's jobs. If you were the governor of this state, you would be part of the government. Well, you're now part of the government, but... what would be good? What would you get rid of?
And again, being a little philosophic, let me go through those same institutions. The power of government is force. Tax power, police power. The power of the family is what? Love and commitment. The power of the church is eternity and hope. The power of business is industriousness and work. And so we've got all these different powers, these different agencies. I lost the word. What are they? They are institutions in our society. Let's use them. So the Founding Fathers says life, liberty, and property. I hold to that intensely. That to maintain those 3, I would use the force of government to protect your lives, your liberties, and your property. And so beyond that, then, I believe intensely in free association. That you can get together, and I got into it at the Columbian about talking about a cemetery board. Somebody dies, we'll get together and say, hey, let's organize a cemetery district so we can got some place to bury our dead. That's free association. But one of the guys in the paper, what do you mean you're not going to let me bury my people? So there are answers both in a centralized government, and the Founding Fathers understood this when they cut government up in federal government, and they said, we'll do some things at the top, some things lower, and some things lower. The bottom layer is you and me. It's called freedom, and that's what people fought and died for.
So, in Washington state government,
Mm-hmm.
what would be an okay role for the government in terms of life, liberty, and property? And what would you get rid of? What would you give
What would I
away
get rid
from
of?
government?
And again, you understand that I'm intensely pro-life, and this goes. I'm not a kid anymore. When I got into that, I fought that 1970, that changing the statute, and I had to sit down. My son was 6, and he says, "Dad, what are you working so hard on?" And I had to explain what abortion was to a 6-year-old. That's tough to do. Now I'm an old coot, and I'm looking at the other side, and thinking, will that generation who has very increasingly less respect for their elders how much are they going to want to support me in my old age? And the whole spectrum is coming around. Life, liberty, and property. Certainly the police power. I would like to get cops on the walking the beat. I'd like to see them armed with things that are a whole lot less lethal than a 15-round magazine. The old police special was a 32 caliber revolver, a lot lighter, whether you could injure somebody but not kill them. At the same time, tend to be okay, the shorelines thing. I'm embroiled in that shorelines thing. And again, these 157 pages of new law are written by people that you and I didn't elect. They may be the best ideas on earth, but there is controversy here. The department has said there's controversy. If there is controversy, that needs to be released in the venue of the legislature, where that heat can be released and an honest argument can be had. Both parties, all sections of the country or the state. So that's property. Your liberties, yeah, I push back on the taxes. I was early on in defending 695, but at the same time, John supports voting on all tax increases. I do not. I fear direct democracy. The 695 did go through the whole loop where they gathered the signatures. What John suggests is we give that to the voters. My poster child for blasting John here is your stadium. And I think that was the purchase of public policy by a wealthy individual. And John and Gary and Paul Allen ganged up on the private citizens. I think it's embarrassing. I don't think there's an example like that in the country.
If I can follow up, would you explain how a populist, without using a label, but as some person who doesn't apparently mind being labeled a populist, how can a populist fear direct democracy?
Federalist 10, Madison, he says, democracies are always spectacles of contention. They are as short in their life as they are violent in their death. I use an extended quote from Tytler's Demise of the Athenian Republic, where he says, they always come apart over a loose fiscal policy. Once I learn that I can vote myself largesse from you, get a stadium, then I will wrap that tax increase in something that's popular, and people will buy it. And so that's why Jefferson, he says, in matters of power, put no more your trusted men, but bind them down from mischief with the chains of the Constitution. If government gets loose, if that tax power gets loose, and it has in some countries, it'll take everything you've got. 40% taxation, in my view, is indefensible. I believe that the citizens are basically good-hearted and they have a reputation of charity, and that if they could keep their money, they would take care of their aged, support all kinds of worthy causes. And Americans got a history of that. I came over here and heard a guy, Paul Marshall, come over to Bellevue last fall. He says, I'm going to talk for 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and somebody's going to starve to death in the Sudan. Then I'm going to talk for another 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Hey, I responded to that. I believe that everybody else has their issues. We'd better.
May I follow up a little bit? You mentioned the shorelines business, and of course you have filed suit against the state.
I better find out if it's filed. We're trying to get somebody in Kitsap County.
So it is not actually
It's
filed?
not actually, I don't know.
Okay.
It's teetering on the edge, but
You want to do it in any case?
Yeah.
And tell us why specifically, what's wrong with what the Department of Ecology has done?
Primarily, my complaint here is procedural, that they have not followed their own rules in saying what is the economic impact of these rules. I want to get that thing into the legislature so the substance can be debated, which I also believe is intensely beyond what the intention of the legislature was. Beyond that, there's a relationship between National Marine Fisheries and our Department of Ecology that I think is unconstitutional. That there's a relationship going there that bridges federalism, the old Harry Truman, the buck stops here. If that happens, you can't tell where the buck stops. And so I think that's wrong. But primarily, they need to have an economic impact of these rules. CD Ted said that these rules will obligate counties, local government, to $18.6 million of expenditure. And I heard the one of the people from ecology saying, well, we'll help you lobby the legislature to raise the money. Now, wait a minute. The administration lobbies the legislature to take money from the taxpayers? Everything's upside down. Okay, do you see that? And so hey, I'm not saying...
What you're looking for is an economic impact statement to accompany the regulations, is that right?
Forgive me. It's a ruse. I'm trying to get it into... Forgive the bold-faced honesty. I'm trying to get it into the legislature where the merits of the thing can be argued.
So, but your ruse is the economic impact statement.
Yes.
Okay.
And their rules say that, but when you're dealing with lawyers, who have I left ungored here today?
Let me follow up on that just a little bit, because the way the legislature works is the legislature passes laws, and the agencies write rules.
Yes.
The RCW and the other one escapes me, but the WACs. But it happens all the time. This is it again. What's the normal procedure? Does the legislature usually haul the agency back in and say, no, your rules aren't right, or do they file suit over in some county? And
Let me take you through that procedure. The bill is filed, and then we need to know what it costs. I say you never tear the menu in half. Lobster and $32. You need to make sure they line up. Then we take that bill, and it goes to the agency that is having to administer that bill, in this case, the Department of Ecology. They tell us what it's going to cost. They said $3.4 million to align GMA and shorelines management, growth management and shorelines management bill. That's what we were trying to do. Take the bumps out so the two could work in conjunction with one another. We didn't, and they're far beyond the scope of that bill. I think that was 1724. HB 1724 for the 95 legislature. But had they have said, oh, and by the way, we're going to rip $18.6 million out of your local government, the counties would have been there screaming, you see? And they said, oh, well, I went down here to a restaurant, parked in their parking lot, got in with friends and went and ate in another restaurant. When I come back to get my car, they won $20 for my car. They would have punched my ticket and let me eat park for free. When they says, hey, we'll punch your ticket for $3.5 million, oh, and by the way, there's $18 million over here that you're going to have to pay, and that we did not even mention to give the counties an opportunity to feed in, I'm saying dirty pool.
so it wasn't in the fiscal note.
It was not in the fiscal note. Fiscal notes are notoriously hanky-panky, by the way, but this was an intentional blindsiding, in my view, of county government. Did you see the thing where the sheriff of Pacific County and Lewis County was kind of taken to the woodshed by Fitzsimmons? Did you see that? They said, look, we can't enforce these rules. It's in August 5th, and it's on the web, and I could get you a copy, but the statements are quite straightforward about, we're not going to enforce bureaucratic rules. And Fitzsimmons got them on the phone and said, what do you mean you're not going to do your job? And kind of backed them down. But one of them talked about, already I'm crosswise with the people that elected me over a septic tank permit. And I need to know that the people who elected me have consented in these laws, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And you, as non-elected bureaucrats, are shoving me into the face of the people that elected me. And those two sheriffs were quite outspoken, and then got clobbered by Tom Fitzsimmons.
The governor and Mr. Carlson are on record about what they would do about trying to halt meth in this state, methamphetamine. And I'm curious what you might do, and I'm also curious about a statement that was made in another publication where you're wondering whether it's time to legalize drugs. Could you talk about both of those?
I think that the AA does a lot of good. We're back to, it's kind of my libertarian side. Have we won the war on drugs? I don't think so. I think that, again, the church, the family has a better answer. I'm not saying legalize drugs, and but pot, I think I'd say grow it and smoke it. But hey, don't you pop my hubcaps or come down the freeway the wrong way, make the same laws apply. But if you look at what happened with the Volstead Act in the 20s, that's how we got organized crime, is trying to enforce alcohol in this. And so I think if we can get the money out and say, smoke it if you want. But again, there's a whole lot of other laws, and it kind of squares with a lot of other views. You can tell me what you think?
I like your idea.
Oh, really? Oh, these people are cagey. So what I'm saying is I don't want to be everybody's commissar, but I think that we need to come up. We won't buy or bluff our way out of the mess that we've got this country in. We need to say, I'm vitally involved in this country. I had a if your water heater poops out, you call Hochstatter Electric. I write it in my dispatch book. One day I come in there and it says, Tony, your child did not show up for school. And when Tony come to work or got done with his day, I said, Tony, I can't fix that, but it's vital to Hochstatter Electric. And so if it shows up again, I will come and get you and we will solve that. But we have got to get back into relationships. We've got to get into each other's lives personally, not legally. And now we're back into DSHS and a lot of other things. These problems are coming about. I think that, hey, we've legalized loneliness and separation. And so, AA, that's a marvelous work.
About meth specifically.
Meth, if you can bust them for making that stuff, speed is an awful, awful, awful drug. And here again, I just read the thing about John Brown. It took him 6 weeks to stretch a rope with that guy. Swift justice. If we have laws on the books, not executing verdicts promptly. When I first ran, I used a quote from Mark Twain. He says, a cat that has sat on a hot stove lid will not sit on a hot stove lid again. He won't even sit on a cold stove lid. And I think that we can get there by enforcing those things that are, and I don't agree with John on make everything a strike. I don't want people to rot in jail, but I do not object to the death penalty.
But you would not want meth production, manufacturing, distribution to be a third strike?
No,
Okay.
no, I wouldn't go there. But at the same time, anything that is a capital crime, I think, needs to be enforced promptly.
Well, just to make sure we're all understanding, you're not suggesting, all right, that these crimes involving meth should be capitalized.
I'm not saying that exactly. I think that the legislature needs to look at what this is. At the same time, I despair of using force to amend the society. I think there are I'm sure there are other, well, if you read that thing that was in that other paper about me, hey, I got some things I'm repentant of, you bet. But I didn't get straight by getting clobbered by the government. I had people come alongside me and chew me out. My wife grew me up. I think that I believe intensely in the amending of character. I think that happens. But I fear all-powerful government.
Senator, some of us on this side of the state worry about the division between Western Washington and Eastern Washington, or at least King County and the rest of the state. You talked about the fact that your issues cover the entire state.
Those that I mentioned, yeah.
Right. Are we wrong to worry that there's a division between the East and West in Washington?
Hey, everybody always feels disenfranchised. The people in the rest of the Grand County think Moses Lake beats up on them. You know, there's always the big kid on the block. At the same time, anything that rises, and then some of it you guys got coming, blow up a $100 million stadium. Somebody ought to be red-faced. I don't want it to be, and economically, it's ugly on my side of the mountains. It's ugly over there. 13% unemployment in March, of course it goes down. Ag is on its ear, and staying that way.
So if you were elected governor, what would you do about mending this division?
Let me suggest, when we haven't talked about transportation, which is John's straight suit, I've been advocating a toll road for trucks from Chehalis to the Canadian border, $1 a mile, $200. There's people. You and I want to be in the city. We work here. We come here. We want to be in the city. Those guys hate being in the city. They want to be in the city unless they gotta be. Build that toll road so that they can get out of town. Build it up against the foothills, but no more than say 1,000 miles of or 1,000 feet of elevation, because they can't do that much climbing. But the reason it's hard to build roads in town is you can't get the right-of-way anymore. Out there, the right-of-way belongs to the state, a lot of it, or to large entities that you can trade and block it up. So I think that would be a good. I would like to see Stampede Pass open for trucks again. That would give you traffic separation. Otherwise, along with that, those folks are very considerate drivers, most of them. But hey, they're driving a huge rig. Get them out of town. And now that would get. Transportation is one of the ways. Another great way is telecom. Did you see the thing that King TV did of the three of us when we went to the cookout? Did any of you see that? He does a bedroom slipper commute, he says. I get up in the morning, I do a bedroom slipper commute to my computer, and I work there. The people leaving Bellevue and going out to Cleellum, they said, we'll commute 4 days a week, and 1 day online. They're 4 days online. That e-commerce thing, the second, and this isn't going to impress you folks, but the second largest business in Cleellum is an internet provider. We passed that.
What's the first one?
Shoemaker. He's a metal fabricator. What do you mean? Don't you know? See what I'm saying about how isolated you guys are over here? And so, things don't always. You look at a problem and you don't always get the answer, but something else is coming up behind. How many things are that way? Something else comes up behind and solves it in a different way. I think e-commerce has got massive possibilities. That land out there, that pretty open country by Cleellum, is just costing a fortune now because these people are building these beautiful homes out there. I was out there, stayed with the guys at Stockbroker, $700,000 home. But hey, you'd love to have him. Except he's killing his neighbors because of property tax going through.
Senator, let me ask you something. If you're elected governor, what would we expect to see in the first 100 days?
I would change the heads of those agencies out. And again, there are people there I can think of. Hey, got nothing against Dennis Braddock. I'd like to know where he's headed. That's only fair. Otherwise, it's just vindictive. I know another guy that is the head of an agency that I really admire. Maybe I'd find another place for him, but I think Will Rogers, he says, when I get a new horse, I hit it between the ears with a rubber hose. He says he never likes it, but he pays close attention to what I'm doing. And I think that maybe we need to do something like that. We need to jerk those reins. The entry into free enterprise is 2 words. You're fired. I've done a whole lot of that. I've written checks. I've run a business, and I've hired and fired. That's some of the hardest things you can do. We need to get those folks, if they're making law, they need to go. Change down several areas of the bureaucracy to get their attention. We need to do something with the Administrative Procedures Act, because this problem must not happen again. And I would recommend this, that we time limit the time that the bureaucrat has to write law. I've got 4 years, and then I can write all the law I want, but if I'm not elected, it doesn't mean anything. Give them 2 years, so they can't pull up an old statute and write more regs under that. If they think that it is that important, that they must ask them for legislative authority. So that's one of the things that we can do to keep the administration from becoming the government. So what I would do, first of all, is I'd sit down with a whole bunch of folks that I know in both parties and have a catharsis session, and then I would talk individually with the heads of those agencies and as far down as I can cut, and then I would replace people. Hey, Andrew Jackson, in his spoils system, what they say, don't hire anybody you can't fire. You just got to do it. You've just got to pull that chain, and we're so ingrown. That line means you're done.
It does, actually. We're done, you're not.
Uh-oh, I got my minute?
You've got 1 minute still on our books, and you can dispatch it any way
Thank
you
you.
like.
This has been a remarkable experience. And again, remember how I started by saying that everybody in this country needs to be able to hey, run for my job. If you don't, I get into audiences and I say, there's one guy that's important here that's going to sound arrogant. I don't know what you do for a living, but everybody in this building needs to be able to have my job. Because if you can't run, if you can't become senator, then you've been denied your heritage. And so that probably sounds rather, maybe it sounds democratic, maybe it sounds populist, but we need to have our children believe that. The whole experience of running for office, of having the stump, I tell you what, being the way down the list guy is an immense liberty, because you can kick them in the shins, and I don't, hey, the things I've spoken to you with, I believe for the bottom of my heart, and I've got not a reason in the world to try and blow smoke at you. I want to be the kind of politician that I can vote for, and I think that one of the essential parts is to be as upfront and forthright as you can possibly be. I've got lots of friends on both sides of the legislature. I love that business because it's hot and heavy, and with all the energy you can put on that issue, the next constituency is entirely different, and it's fascinating. Thank you.
Thanks very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate your
It's been my
coming
pleasure.
over, and
Now I got to be in Spokane. If you want to know what's wrong with your roads, it's me. I got to see if my car's still there, because
oh, that's right.
you are going to appear
Okay.
as a character witness on my behalf.